it's all about how you choose to spend your money, right? Or how you choose to spend your time. So I think it's like, just make sure that it aligns with your internal goals, that personal goals that I think is really important.
Hi, everyone. It's Dean.
And it's B. We're here to help you build your commercial real estate network so you can get your foot in the door and design the career of your dreams.
We interview leaders in commercial real estate and hear their stories of failure, triumph, basic survival, and hard-won wisdom.
It's like having coffee with the real estate pro.
You're listening to How I Got My Job.
Hey, guys. We're back with another episode of How I Got My Job. Dean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, B. Excited for this episode.
I am so excited for this episode. We have Amanda Strong. She is someone who I consider a mentor. When it comes to representation matters, and when that statement comes to mind, I think of Amanda, just because she was the first person I saw that looked like me who was doing commercial real estate. And I can't wait to just talk and get into her story.
Yeah, B, I think both you and I have had the experience of working with Amanda in the early parts of our career. When I was starting out for the first time in commercial real estate, I actually got to act as Amanda's lawyer on a bunch of negotiations.
So before we introduce Amanda, let's tell you who she is and what she does. Amanda Strong is a director of asset management for MITIMCo, MIT's investment management company, where she is responsible for overseeing a portfolio of commercial real estate assets in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Amanda has a lot of accolades. She has a lead AP professional, graduated from Babson College for her undergrad degree, moved on to getting her master's at MIT with a master's in real estate development at MIT. She is now currently on the Babson board, and she's a Babson trustee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. She was the founding member and former president of AREP New England, and received the President's Award from NAIOP, Massachusetts, was recognized as Women of Fire by Banker and Tradesmen. Amanda, so much under your belt. So excited to have you here. So excited to talk to you. How are you doing today?
You know what? It's another day. We're trying to wrap up everything. As you guys know, when the year end comes, everybody wants to make sure your bills are paid and your tenants are happy, and eating a lot of Christmas cookies because we're having all of our tenant Christmas parties. So it's been a really great year.
That's so good to hear. Amanda, let's jump in. We said your title was Director of Asset Management at MITIMCo. First of all, who knew MIT had an investment management company? So how about we dive in there and talk about what you do and what are you doing at MIT?
Yeah, really lucky or blessed, depending on what words you decide to choose. The MIT endowment is $30 billion. So it's one of the biggest. And you guys know a lot about MIT. So many entrepreneurs have come who they're curing cancer, they're curing sickle cell, they're curing cystic fibrosis. This is like amazing that I'm here. And that so much aligns with B, as you know, I bleed from the heart. And it's a really amazing place where you end up making money for MIT and all of the money that we have, because MIT is a nonprofit and I'm part of that. I'm actually a development department of MIT. All of that money goes right back into the endowment to help build on the MIT mission. So I've been here. It'll be 8 years. My responsibility is to oversee the portfolio of assets that are all in Cambridge. So the endowment oversees an international and broad spectrum of investments. We are responsible for the real estate assets that are non-academic. So I've got a team of 4 people. There's about 25, 30 people in real estate, and then there's 75 people that work for the endowment.
And what do you like about what you do there?
So, I mean, if you look at today, what I like about it depends on the day you ask. It's, I'm a people person. And our tenants are how we make money. You don't get money without rent, right, Dean? Without a lease. But that involves a bunch of things. So we have to negotiate the lease, figure out the marketing, figure out the physical space, figure out the financials. It really uses, and I've been doing this, unfortunately, as you guys know, a really long time. Not unfortunately, I should say. I just turned 58 last week. So, but I've probably been doing it for 30 years, and you learn something new every day. And it uses all of the skill sets. So if you go back to, we'll probably talk about it, my very first job, shipping boys' underwear, even though you might think that is, how could I possibly be using that? We had to evaluate who sold the best and figure out who to resell to. So it was really about utilization, and even things from 40 years ago are still relevant.
Yeah, Amanda, well, thank you again for joining us. We want to sort of get to the heart because our listeners are always trying to figure out, look, we see these amazing people at these amazing organizations. They really want to sort of dig in and understand how did they get there to see if there's a pathway or lessons to be learned for themselves. And you've been, just to give some context around shipping boys underwear, I presume that was at Marshall's.
It was, yeah.
Amanda, just to give a little bit of the background so people understood. But you've been at Marshall's, you were at Staples as the Director of Research and Strategy. You've been on the banking side at Key Bank and as a construction lender. And you've been at a number of the larger funds in the U.S., from New Boston Fund to Colony Realty Partners, Colony Capital, and now at MIT. Where did this story begin? I mean, I've heard that it started in New Bedford, but you tell us.
So technically, yeah. So it started in the Cape Verde Islands. If you wanted to go back to my grandparents, they all four of them came over on the boat, as they would say. So just like B's family from an island somewhere where it was much warmer in Boston. I'll never figure that one out. And we have to go back someday. But I was actually born on an Army base in Fort Devens. My father was a lifetime Army guy. He was in for 30 years. As a matter of fact, I was at the Army-Navy game. Unbelievable. So much energy and so grateful to, what the armed forces do. And the part of life that changed me. I mean, part of what happened, we moved every 2 years. And when you move every 2 years, does a couple of things. Some good, some not so good. But you have to be able to learn your surroundings and be successful in it without, no attachment. You have to kind of take what you did 2 years ago. So I made a lot of friends quickly, got to know the environment, and depended on my, family. So obviously very close to the members of my family. And I think that those roots that's in real estate. It's a very similar thing. You have to understand the deal, focus on it, and do your strategy and move on.
I was going to say a lot of the things you do today. So those skill sets were necessary for you to be who you are today. So as scary as it might have been, you're using all those skill sets.
Yeah. And as you guys know, real estate has a lot of risk to it. And one of the things I will say, growing up certainly lets you manage risk and understand how to. I think people who I'm moderately risk averse, so I'm not on the development side, but I'm willing to. So, for example, be just like you did, going down a path. I was at Staples and went back to school to get a master's degree. So, I think how you grow up and how your family handles risk can affect positively, in my case, just how you see risk as an adult.
And then just talking a little bit about your mom, right? She pushed college on all of you guys, right? And when I say all of you guys, all of your siblings. I know your dad was in the Army, but this is who really pushed you to become who you are today. She didn't have a career in mind, which was nice. Talk a little bit about that and how that really built your foundation.
Yeah, my mother had always said, and she was smarter than all of us. I have a sister who's a doctor, it's a sister who's environmental scientist, and a sister who's insurance. So all successful in our own right. But my mother said the saddest day for her life was when she graduated from high school. As Black women in this Cape Verdean community, especially first generation, nobody told you about scholarships or, college opportunities. They sent her down the route to be a secretary. And in fact, she was a great secretary and raised a family of 5 of us, her and my father, while doing that. But for her, we had the intellect and the ability to go. And she was one of those mothers. She was with us at the guidance counselor's office, saying, well, I think we could be in the next level class. I had to take AP. I didn't really know there was a choice. And my sisters as well, so all of my sisters went to college and have done really well. And for me, as the youngest, it wasn't a choice, but I'm glad it wasn't a choice. But B, to your point, she wasn't about, oh, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. She was just like, go figure it out. And Babson for me, and as you guys know, I'm still heavily involved at Babson. I love it. When I walked on that campus, entrepreneurship, the whole concept of business, it was clear to me that, so I will say for people who are watching this, like, if there's something that touches your soul, gravitate towards that.
So, Amanda, when you were in college, I'd say the majority of our listeners that are first gens are listening from college. How did you sort of figure out what the next step would be for you? And I also think, would love to hear through your trajectory, because you've made some changes. And I think a lot of people are afraid, look, the first step is going to define them forever. And that's certainly not the case, but would love to hear your experiences.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have said this to others too. Your job out of college is almost definitely not going to be what you end up doing for a living. Like, let it go. It's more important. And especially now, I think with the younger generation, not to sound like old lady, but it really is about who you work with. Like, and B can tell you, like, well, both of you guys, we had some really great people. We worked for some really great people and we had a lot of fun. But we worked a lot and we were at work a lot. So I think that a lot of college students are, if you want to be a doctor, it's different. There's a path that you have to go down, that the earlier you can go down that path, the better off you are. But for me, I thought I was going to be in marketing. And I literally, it was paying, if you guys will laugh at this, it was $16,000 a year, which was just awful. So I went to Marshall's for like $18,000 a year. $2,000 a year, by the way, is a lot of money. Huge. It was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Rent was $200 a month, whatever. But I think that what worked out great is you meet people along the way and you make friends. And there were just people, and B, I think we're going to talk about this. There were people who I connected with that set a path that I wouldn't have planned myself.
And to me, those people are so important because they're helping you to see outside of yourself. A lot of the times you can't see outside of yourself because you didn't really have anyone else. Like, you have a mother who really couldn't see past what she was doing, and she's sending you out there, and a father who really stuck to the Army, right? So you needed to see someone else's vision to see past your own because you didn't have much of a vision either. So I say that to say, students, like, listen to people. When people speak into you, you have to listen because they're seeing something in you that you may not have seen inside yourself. So I say that because that has happened to me. So it's happened to Amanda. I'm sure it's happened to Dean. So I just want to throw that out there as a point that needs to be taken. But I do want to read a quote from you and just tell me how it resonates. And this is what you said. I could have stayed at Staples and had a great career, but I wanted to have more of an impact. It's scary. You have to quit your job and you are starting from scratch. But if you have a passion for something, just do it. There are times to take chances.
Who said that?
You said that. Talk a little bit about, because that's a loaded statement, right? Talk about how you felt. Like, it's scary to do this. And there are some people right now who have started their career and they're listening to this podcast, not coming out of college, but they're in a career that they've been doing for 5 years and ready to change. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your experience and what made you feel comfortable to do that.
So I was at Staples, and I literally, what I did at Staples was, as head of research, is when we opened a new store, it was my group who analyze the profitability of that store, and we would work with the real estate people to make the presentation to senior management. I had, again, a guy named Joe Vasiluzzo, who I still, just to the bottom of my heart, he was the head of real estate. Funny, classic, just all around super smart guy. And we connected. So I loved the people that I work with, and I could have stayed there I'd still be there now. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know. One day I woke up and I'm like, what am I? I was driving to Framingham, and like, what am I doing? And why am I in Framingham? Like, what do I have that I could offer anyone else? Not just for more self-fulfillment, but like, is this really what I should be doing? And I thought, as a Black woman, there weren't many. There weren't even many women. And I was like, and that's actually what happened even at Marshall's. Like, you just wake up one day and you go, I'm just going to try this thing a little differently. And I wanted to do urban development. And I had lived in New York for a while, and the professor said I went to NYU for a certificate program in real estate. And he goes, oh, well, if you want to finish and you're going back to Boston, you should go to MIT. And you're like, oh, yeah, right, sure. I'll go to MIT. And he's like, no, I'll write your letter of recommendation. And then, coincidentally or not, the guy who sat next to me, Bernie Schachter, was one of the first graduates of the program. And I was like, wait, maybe I can actually get in to MIT. And I met some of the people, and obviously it's a game changer. I think that college gives you your base, your infrastructure. It's about the experience. You're meeting friends for life, and you're living away from home. I was 17, but graduate school was really where I solidified my, decision to get into real estate. And B, I don't know if you've thought about it. You went for your MBA. Mm-hmm. You knew you maybe wanted to do research, real estate. And I think it's a choice that people will, the people who are on this podcast listening will have to make at some point. Like, an MBA will give you more of a general approach. And if you get a real estate degree, you're going to do real estate. So mm-hmm. for me, but the beautiful thing about real estate is I was doing real estate at Staples. I was doing real estate really when I left Marshall's. I've been doing it for 30 years, but I've been doing something a little bit different every time. And that's kind of the fun of it is, back to your original question, Dean, even though you start on a path, that path is adding to whatever that future path is going to be. And none of that experience is lost.
Amanda, quick question on that, because we have a lot of students that come to us and they're trying to think about, look, if I go back to school, I leave the workplace, do I go back full time and really embrace the experience? Do I try to go to a part-time situation, or am I better off sticking where I am? And it sounds like for you, going to a full-time program made a lot of sense, but would love to hear your thoughts on that decision point for folks.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to change, when I was at MIT, out of the 30 of us, there were like 10 architects who wanted to get into development. And if you look at the success, the path, it's unbelievable. If I told you the roster of what my colleagues are doing 20 years later, it's remarkable. Mm-hmm. We all got to know each other. We spend so much time. It's 12 months. In real estate, what do we talk about? Return on investment. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of money. Right. It's $100,000, so you need to know that that's what you want. But I wouldn't trade that experience. I still talk to, and by the way, if anybody calls me from MIT who's a Center for Real Estate grad, I take the call, so it's a network. It's a network benefit that I don't know you would get if you did an online MBA. Now, I think if you're in finance and you already have a strong undergraduate degree and some good work experience, the finance MBA or getting a CFA, I think that's perfectly appropriate. And financially, the MBA concept is not a cheap concept. So hopefully you could do it and have a support system, somebody, your parents or your spouse or a partner, or a company that will allow you, because sometimes they do let you take that time off if it's a short period of time and come back and work for them. That's really the idea.
Great. And so, Amanda, you graduate from MIT and you have this long real estate career. Tell us how you navigated through those different stops along the way. How did you know whether you should stay with a company or go? What kind of cultures did you gravitate to?
I think that younger people probably don't stay long enough. I think it's good to stay for a few years and finish whatever work it is you're doing, and if you think about the first job out of school, again, shipping boys underwear, whatever that is, financial analyst, get really good at it, build those relationships, meet the people who at some point you to join like the NAOPs and the ULIs of the world so that you can meet your future employer. I've been here 8 years. I was at Colony 8 years. I was actually at Marshall's for 8 years. So I like to stay a little bit longer. I would say in most of those cases, it was a phone call. I wasn't actively looking, but you definitely want to take the opportunities when they present themselves. I think both of you could have done what you were both doing. And then you just go, well, this is a really great opportunity. I just think there's a balance between that. And like, I've been here 8 years. I still have things that I'm so close to like wrapping up and feel like putting a bow on it. It's nice to put a bow on stuff if you can.
When do you know if you're a student when it's time to leave? What is that feeling that you get, right? And then what, right? Because I just want to talk these folks through the process, because there is a time to leave. Some people stay too long, right? And that's a thing too. So can you just before we wrap this segment up, give people some advice of like, when it's time to stay, what's too long, but what's the right amount of time?
Yeah. And I don't think you can put a number on it, but I can tell you, if you are getting up, if it's Sunday night and you're torn up and you're really miserable and it's cutting into your Sunday afternoon, you need to start thinking about that, or if you feel like you're going in, and this is just my opinion, I think there's people who can go in and do the same job for years and it won't bother them. But like, to me, if you have something, then you give that back, share it with us, make things better, take some chances. Otherwise, what's the point? You spend how many hours of your life? What percentage of your life is spent at work? I just think if it's not fulfilling for you, or if you meditate, and when you think about your job, if it doesn't align with who you are, then you shouldn't be doing it. I had a really interesting, I don't call it a revelation because it sounds kind of corny, and I don't even remember if it was a dream I had or something, but we were talking about choices. And you say, well, I could never leave my job because X, Y, and Z. I make too much money. It's important to me, like from an ego standpoint, like all of those things, still your choice. You could actually live probably on a lot less money than you make. It's all about how you choose to spend your money, right? Or how you choose to spend your time. So I think it's like, just make sure that it aligns with your internal goals, that personal goal set, I think is really important.
I love everything you're saying. And even with what you're saying, it kind of touches on inclusiveness and the pipeline stuff that you're doing, and AREV and the DE&I collaborative, because you're like, just working wasn't enough. You want to do more, and you want to bring a fulfillment within yourself, but also within the industry. Can you just talk about some of the things that you've been up to with trying to just enhance the industry and the work that you're putting in outside of your everyday job.
And the funny part of that is, like, obviously, as a Black woman, and this, it's impossible for it to not be part of your day job. We've been living this for for a whole life, basically. I think where it started, I would say I was pretty much unaware of the importance of, believe it or not, as a Black woman. When I was 20, I was just about at the time, Amanda Andrade. I was in finance. I knew the next job that I was going to have. I knew everything, which is terrible. And I'm sure people in their 20s, that's kind of what you do. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, you're the only one in the room. And it started to be everywhere I went. I was always the only one. And I had a conversation with somebody, and they were like, well, doesn't that make you feel special to be the only one? And I was like, I don't think so. I'd like to not be the only one. And that's when the dialogue started. And just like we were saying at the beginning, there's people who you connect with. And I can say this as a Black woman, there are white men and white women and Asian men and Latinx men and Latinx women who, even though we had different experiences, for some reason, we connected. I will say in particular, when I was at Marshall's, there was a huge Jewish contingent. And I think there's a lot of similarities between the road that they've had to experience and the Black experience. And because of that, I think there were a lot of Jewish men, for me in particular, if that sounds crazy, were empathetic and understood kind of the path that I was on. And so as I've achieved a certain level of success, or whatever you want to call it, the more people you realize you have an ability to bring more people to the table. And B, I think you remember this when we founded AREP in Boston. Mark Harmeling, who was one of the partners at Colony, was literally one of my biggest cheerleaders. And Kirk Sykes was my boss. And these were people who, went through a different time. It was a lot different for them, but we were able to bring a lot of new people in. And if you go through, Arthur Jemison, Saeed Coates, me, Tague, you, look at the Marcella Barrier. There's a whole group of us who were trying to figure out what we were doing. And you know what? We're all doing okay. And bringing other people up and along with us, which is, I think, what it's all about.
Can I read another quote from you?
Yeah. You didn't tell me this ahead of time. I'll have to.
This is the fun part. My hope is to be able to move the needle on wealth creation for underrepresented groups. I think it's also important for people not from underrepresented groups to recognize that to solve the problem, it is important that they figure out how to help.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
It's all about accountability, and now, mind you, I was saying this all the time, like, I'm not, if you are an agnostic or an atheist, I will not try to bring you to church. Those are not the people I want to try and win, although sometimes that happens. It's the people who have been coming and not getting involved that you can really get them to make a commitment. And one of the things I'm proud of at Babson is that, Steve Spinelli, who's the president of the college, embraced it. Like DE&I, and this is before George Floyd, but he thought about it and was like, entrepreneurial leadership, in order for you to be a good leader, you need to be inclusive. And the way that you're inclusive is hearing other people, listening. We've been talking about the terrible events that have been going on. And I can't, even though you may or may not be able to relate to it, and everyone has some people have an opinion, all we can do is listen. And he has held his staff accountable and really helped set the sort of the mantra and the culture. And as you guys know, it's all about leadership. Like, if you have leaders who can make things inclusive, it goes a long way.
Man, I think those those points are really important. And I think what we face with a lot of our students that are trying to break in is that it, it's that there are a whole bunch of unwritten rules. I think that they feel that there's a disadvantage of. We started Coffee Connectors back in 2017. I was at an Upward Bound graduation, and a kid was graduating at the top of his class at Carnegie Mellon into what was a booming market. And he said he was having a hard time finding jobs because his uncle, his roommates' uncles and parents were opening doors and getting all these kids coffees, and he didn't have that opportunity. I think one of the things that we're trying to do is teach some of those unwritten rules and how to network and reach out to people and give people the confidence to do that. How has networking played in your life, Amanda? And how did you navigate that if you didn't come from a household where people were necessarily navigating in the business world of Boston?
Yeah, there's so many aspects to the business world that we weren't exposed to. Even if it's just showing up, how do you show up? You show up early. You show up well dressed. You show up well prepared. You listen, stop talking, all those things. But certainly networking is something that you don't learn about until you have to. You know what I mean? Going to your career services offices, that's not how people get jobs. I think that's why it's important to go to your alumni association, pick the names, use technology, LinkedIn. I always tell the Babson students, find someone who worked at the company you want, or who works there, send an email, have an informational interview, be curious, do your research, especially do your research. There's so much information out there. And be interesting. This one guy who worked for us, he used to ask this interview question, of the candidates, what can you teach me? We've got 7 minutes left in the interview. And somebody was like, okay, here's how you do a paper plane. Or here's how you, I set up a playlist. Here's how so I think it's creating a connection with people again because you're a regular person just like we are. We were there. I will take a phone call to a fault, actually, meet people for coffee, answer questions. And you'll do the same thing 30 years from now.
I think first generation students are just so naturally interesting just by way of their background. So I just want to give a shout out to first generation students and say, you may not be starting from this platform that others are starting from, but you do have a platform and you should stand on it, and you should stand on your background. And that's that diversity. When we talk diversity, that's what we're talking about. In the workplace, everyone shouldn't have the same thought and the same mindset. And so I just want to continue to reiterate that that thought for first generation students. You come in different because that's why they're hiring you. So I just want to put that out there. Dean, you had a thought.
No, B, I was just going to say a similar thought. We had Peter Brofman from GCM Grosvenor on last, who is, as I said, he is beloved in the industry. But his point was, I think a lot of folks that are first gen or coming from diverse backgrounds always are hearing it at what the disadvantage is, but he really saw them as advantaged in the fact that they've had to learn how to deal with different obstacles in their life, that they've learned grit, that they've learned resilience, that they've learned how to navigate different situations and entering into worlds that are unfamiliar. And in all of those attributes are the attributes that we talk about today in all the TED Talks and in all the research, as these are really the attributes that make you successful. So maybe, Amanda, if you can talk to that, just sort of what out of your experience growing up do you think, and it sounds like you had a lot sort of traveling around, really helped you stand out in your career?
So my first example of this, and I remember it clearly, if you're familiar with South Bay Center, there is a Marshall's, there is a Best Buy, Stop and Shop. And I was maybe 23 years old when my position at Marshall's, similar to the one at Staples, but in a much more analytical position, was to study the financials of the market and plan for. So, for example, what they call shrink. How much merchandise was going to get stolen? What should the price points be? What were the general expenses? Right, looking at the operating expenses. So you would study the demographics and find a store that was similar. And there was commentary that suggested, if you guys know where that is, right? It's on the cusp of sort of Dorchester, the South End, a very interesting neighborhood. And I remember being in the actual investment committee with senior vice presidents there and sort of defending the market and, saying, well, if you look at the people here, like, okay, even though there was a sense of what happens if you're poor and the analogies that were drawn. And so I felt at that moment, my voice in the room was one that really hadn't been heard very often, and just some new perspectives and one way to that it could actually be a beneficial location. And again, about diversity and the mix of customers and the attractiveness. Who knew that store blew away sales projections? It blew away sales projections.
And it's still there today.
It's still there
today.
Huge success. And I think it taught people a lot about stereotypes and what you maybe looks on its face to be something, and hearing a different voice. I think it is hard, and especially for younger people who it's their first time in the room, to have the guts to stand up and say something. But it's really important because you're in that room so that your voice can be heard. And I think
that's why they hired you. That is
and
exactly
that's why they hired you. They may not even know that that's why they hired you. And I think sometimes that they're still like, oh my God, there you go again. But you will bring a perspective that, just first generation, regardless of your race, which is a social construct anyway, but like your socioeconomic background, again, my Army background, whatever your background was, whatever it was that made you uniquely you, is going to bring a new voice to the table.
I think everything you're saying is just hammering home all the things we've talked about throughout all the episodes that we've had on this podcast. So, Amanda, thank you for the insight. I do want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about MIT and global warming and what you guys are doing over there, in addition to all the wonderful things that you've already mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. We have a whole department. MIT has a whole department dedicated to sustainability. As you know, one of the challenges is we have to balance life sciences, where we're curing disease, and those sciences need very specific, right now, controls. You need a hood with 100% air exchange. Very difficult to do that on an all-electric basis. But one of the things we are doing is looking into every avenue that we can so that we can figure out how to have electric buildings. We've, is there a way for us to invest in supporting any types of technology? And we're super focused on that. And, I think one of the things I'm excited about is MIT, at my level, it's sort of small scale, but, as we have buildings that need new chillers or new systems, really making sure that those are efficient and can save energy. And I think the whole idea, again, leadership is extremely focused and supportive. So I think that part is certainly, I could tell you, being at MIT, I know we'll be able to lead figuring that out.
Great. Amanda, we always end with this one question. I'm always interested to hear what people have to say. So if you could go back in time and sit with your college self, and you could pass along one message from the future, and it can't be buy Apple stock, which is a common answer we get.
Yeah.
Well, what piece of wisdom would you want to deliver to your college age self?
It's so corny, but like whatever you think, that's what you should do. Like, I think it's important to get other people's opinions and hear people, but the one voice that will always be with you and is your truth is the voice in here. And if I were to think back to 21, the day I crossed over and moved my little thing on, it would be like whatever your guts, your true north, and like take that jump in the water, take the risk. And I will say, just do it. It won't get easier. When you're 21, it's the best time to take whatever risk you would. So, and eat butter, eat lots of butter.
Yeah, because you can actually work it off really quickly.
I love butter.
Guys, Amanda, this has been amazing. We've heard so much and got really deep, but it's important to get deep. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the work you do and what you're doing to help move the industry forward. So, just wanted to thank you and thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. I hope to see you guys in person soon.
Of course.
Definitely. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you for listening to How I Got My Job, a podcast from Coffee Connectors.
Coffee Connectors helps connect first-gen college students with a whole new level of opportunity in commercial real estate.
To learn more, visit coffeeconnectors.com.
We would love to connect with you.